Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 33rd episode of Kouryer Podcast. Today, I'm joined with Tomàs Barceló Castelà. He's an illustrator and a sculptor from Spain. Now, with that out of the way, could you give us a little introduction on how you got into visual arts and design?
Hi, hello, how are you? I suppose that, like almost every artist I know, I started when I was a kid. All the kids I know like to draw and sculpt and build things. The difference between the artist and the people who's not an artist is just that the other people stop at some point, can be at 11 or at 15, but I didn't stop, so I just continue um, drawing and sculpting and building things since now. And I think I'm not going to stop now.
Awesome. And were you originally studying? Of course, you said from the childhood you were like really into art and drawing, but were you originally studying art and design, or you were pursuing another career path? And how was the journey?
Well, I think it's funny because I wanted to be a movie director. I like
Mm,
cinema, I love cinema, and I wanted to be a movie director. And in fact, when I was building things when I was a kid, I was always building sets for imaginary movies. So I was building the set because I didn't have a camera, but I did all the process. I did the sets, and I make like a very poor prosthetics, and I like to make all these things to make a movie. So when I have to decide my career, I start with movie direction, but there was not a perfect way to do it from my island. So the only way was to study arts, and at the end of the arts, try image and sound. So I study arts, but with the movies in my mind. It was just in the third year I decided that that was not my way. I love movies, but my way was sculpture. And I remember that like a big decision in my life. And it was so I studied arts, but I was not interested in arts. I was interested in movies, but I finally ended making sculptures. That it was what I was doing since I was a kid. I was not making movies, I was building sets and making sculptures, but I didn't know. So I
mm,
suppose I was in a sculpture, but I didn't know.
interesting. And what is, of course, I mean, it's obvious from the background, with your background, all the sculptures, but I mean, the question I'm going to ask is, what is your main branch of design that you're focusing on, which is obvious, as you said, is sculpting. But the thing I'm going to go with is, tell us your experience from the start of it, until now. Like, how's the journey of that been?
Well, I'm starting to being old, so it's long, but I think we can find three stages. Mm,
Hmm.
From when I was a kid until the 23 years that I was interested in everything, but I was building to make other things. I was building, as I said, you. I remember me with 9 years making movie sets like Indiana Jones a little bit with clay to make a
Hmm.
movie that is never made because I didn't have a camera. So I was making all these things until I decided to be in a sculpture. And I studied with Josep Salvador Jessams. He's one of the best sculptors I have ever met, and I think he's amazing. And I learned a lot with him. So I changed my mind completely. I forget a little bit the movies and I focused on the very classic sculpture. My art school was not a classic art school; it was very contemporary, and we were a little a small secret group in the underground of the school of arts making classic sculpture. It was really underground to make these classic sculptures in that moment. So I started at 23 to make classic and very classic sculpture. And finally, I think the last episode of this, it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I started to make to work on movies, and the my two walls came together. So all the
Mm.
language of the classical sculpture I have learned since I was 23 met my passion when I was younger than that. And I started to make these fantasy and science fiction things I loved when I was a kid with the knowledge and the passion of the classic and very ancient sculpture I learned since I was 23. So I don't know
Awesome.
if it's good for you this explanation.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And actually, I mean, we're going to talk about it later in the podcast, but I mean, the theme I see in your works that some of them like a mix of like ancient South American inspired like stuff mixed with steampunk, which is like I think is super cool. But of course, we're going to get into it later. Let's not spoil anything for now. So when it comes to your design process for like for example working on a project or a certain sculpture that comes to your mind, how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a project?
Well, I'm not very. Um, I don't like to repeat the processes, so it can change a lot from one piece to the other one. But mainly, the things I'm making now is a very classic process, very medieval, even if you want, because it's sculpted in clay, in water clay, molded and casted in plaster, and carved and finishing the plaster, like it was done in the 19th century. And after that, molded again in silicon, and we are going to the modern materials now and cast it in resin. So the process is very classic, very ancient, but the theme is not. So that's this mix of everything. And what I started to do a few years ago, it's finishing all this with assembly. So finding the small objects I like or some parts and mix this with the all the ancient process. So it's very strange. A lot of people doesn't know exactly what I'm doing, but in
Hmm.
fact, it's not very special. It's very ancient. It's not new.
All right, and I want to talk about, as we said, like 2 minutes ago. I want to talk about like some of the your artworks, like some of the themes that run through your artworks. Actually, as we said, first of all, I mean, it's kind of obvious. You said you like sci-fi, steampunk, and all that. Like, I want you to let me know what are your main inspirations when it comes to your works. You know.
Yes. I think it's the mix of these two lives, artist lives I had.
Mm-hmm.
The themes is more based on my childhood and when I was young. All these movies I like, of Jules Verne and of course Spielberg and Alien. All these movies I was watching when I was a kid, even when I was not understanding what was happening there. But all this is mixed with my passion of the ancient sculpture when I was studying arts. So I think now my main inspiration, what I think is most important for me, is the ancient sculpture,
Mm-hmm.
Egypt and Babylonic, and as you said, the American, but also Asia and Africa, everything that is really old and is not even classic. It's
Mm-hmm.
ancient, more ancient than classic art.
Yeah.
So that's my main inspiration, but mixed with other experiences more modern, like Alien, for example. So in my mind is what happened if I can represent an alien civilization with the
Mm-hmm.
Egypt language.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting concept. Thinking about it, like mixing steampunk and sci-fi and all that with the art of like bas reliefs of ancient like civilizations. I mean, that's just amazing. And I had a question for you. Have you ever looked into like reliefs and bas reliefs, for example, from ancient Persian empires? Like, there's
Uh,
because for a while, because I'm not really into the ancient art that much, but for a while I was going to become a tour guide because I'm from Iran. I'm living in Turkey, but I'm Iran. I was supposed to be a tour guide, and of course, because of that, I need to have a lot of knowledge about like the sites and bas reliefs and everything, Persepolis and all that. So I want to know what's your opinion on that, and what's are your favorite parts about the, for example, let's say Persian Achaemenids, or like ancient bas reliefs and
I
art.
think they are amazing, and I'm making my bas reliefs now, and I love it. It's the mix
Hmm.
between drawing and sculpture, and I'm really passionate, and I want to make more things about it. Um, the Haunting of the Lions. I don't know if you know this relief. It's one of the art pieces that made me cry at some point in my life.
Hmm.
So it's amazing.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Which one?
The Hunting of the Lions. I don't know that the name maybe in English. I
Okay, let
think
me check
it's
it out.
I
Where is
think
it
it's
from? Is it in?
I think it's Assyrian.
Ah,
It's
oh, I
in
think.
London.
Oh, it's in a museum.
Yes.
Oh, the Royal Lion Hunt of Ashurbanipal. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, it's Assyrian, as you said. Wait. I found it. Right now, all right, we're at 10. We're basically at 11 minutes. I'm gonna edit that and put that in the 11-minute mark. All right. So people can understand what we're talking about. And yeah, I mean, wow, yeah, it's in British Museum. Interesting.
Yes.
And what else? What else do you have you really liked when it comes to like ancient works? Not just in Iran, like other cultures as well.
Oh, I remember when I was studying, when I was maybe in second degree, year of my career of my art studying. As I said, you the school was very contemporary and all was about installations and all these kind of things that
Mm-hmm.
I think they are good, but I'm not really interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
So I had small moments that I was going to the library in secret because there was not internet at the moment, and I was
Mm-hmm.
watching all these books of ancient cultures, and I was feeling that I was making something wrong because of course I had to look for more modern art, but I found all this um, ancient art so amazing that it was my I don't know how to say it was my home. So I
Mm-hmm.
was living in a place that okay, it's nice and it's good, but I'm not feeling comfortable here.
Mm-hmm.
But with all this ancient art, I was feeling at home, and there was something secret there that I loved, and I didn't know why. And I was watching everything I can find, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very interested in history, so I mix
Mm-hmm.
everything. But I remember one day that I was checking a book of Africa, Nigeria. I don't know if the name is correct, and another book of China, and I was very surprised that in very different places, in very different moments, I don't remember the century, but they were very different. They solved this part of the eye, where the eye is touching the nose. It
Mm-hmm.
was solved in the same way, and it was not a naturalistic way. So I was amazed because there was something real in this interpretation that was like universal. So I
Mm-hmm.
was keeping watching all these kind of arts, and I can't tell you which one I prefer. For me, it's
Mm-hmm.
all the same. It's like a very ancient secret language. I couldn't understand, but I could feel that it was right.
Mm-hmm.
So Egypt and Nigeria and China and Japan and everything, Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
Turkey,
And
everything.
ah,
Of course.
all right. And I have a like particular question. I remember a while ago while I was studying some stuff, on internet, my own personal research, I came across this pattern called, I don't know if you know, flower of life. I don't know if you know it. The
Yes.
flower of life pattern. Like it's kind of like circles and there's a lot of geometric type properties in it. And the craziest thing is that there is the flower of life relief and pattern in all ancient civilizations all across the world, like in China, in South America, in I think even in Middle East, which is like as you said about like the sign when you of the where the eye meets the nose, like those things. As you said, it's kind of like a ancient language. Like there are some concepts that I think even when there was no connection between continents, simultaneously at some point every civilization would come to when it came to art and math. And like at some point, they were drawing circles, and they say, "Oh, we can do this if it's symmetrical. It's gonna make a shape," And it's just crazy how human brain works the same.
That's something that Joan Reboy is a sculptor I love. He was the master of my master. So he
Hmm.
was the master of Jassans, and I learned with Jassans. He was talking about the aesthetic reality. There was
Hmm.
something was real with aesthetic that was repeated in history, and of course, the best way to make this part of the eye, and I'm focusing on this part because it's very special. Everybody was arriving to the same solution, and it was not copying the reality. It was um, interpreting. I don't know. I can find the name now. It was like feeling the reality and explain it in another language, the language of
Mm.
sculpture, and
Hmm.
they all arrived to the same solution, a very similar solution. But it's not just copying reality; it's something deeper than that. It's like in maths,
Interesting.
you said. Maths are
Yeah.
not in the reality, in the nature, but they are real. Yes. So there are some kind of maths in arts and in beauty.
Hmm. True. Yeah. Yeah. And next question is, who are your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
Well, when I work in movies, or I have worked in not too much movies, but I have worked in some of them. I see that my references are not the same than my colleagues when I work with them, because
Hmm.
I don't know a lot of good artists there now, because my references are people who I don't know what was his name, people who died maybe 3,000 years ago,
Hmm.
and I don't know, even they was not one people, it was a team probably. So it's very difficult for me to say who is my favorite artist.
Hmm.
Even in the very evident influences, for example, Geiger, a lot of people find Geiger or Moebius in my work. And I think it's true, but I didn't know them since I was big. Since I was maybe 20 years old. But I liked them before because I watched the movies. So I was,
Hmm.
um, they were my references, even if I didn't know them as artists. And also happened
Interesting.
that there are a lot of people who has changed my work or my way to see the arts. They are not sculptors and they are not drawers. There's, for example, Mr. Finch is an amazing British artist who makes um, like fabric puppets. They are amazing. He makes animals and kind of things, but it's incredible. And I remember when I discovered him, I said, if this man can make this just with fabrics, what we could do with the ancient language of the sculpture.
Mm.
And of course, there are a lot of people that I love. It's difficult for me to say a name, even 10
Oh,
names.
yeah. Yeah, understandable. And I mean, of course, we talked about it briefly, but in depth, like in a more complete answer, what is the main subject of your artworks and what made them interesting to you? Like, what's the expression? What what message are they usually trying to express? If that makes sense.
I I think each art has his own expression and his own language, and I think the sculpture is the art of the presence. It's not the art of the storytelling. That could be the painting or the drawing, like concept, for example. But sculpture is presence because when you can see in a sculpture in real life, not in picture, not on Instagram, but when you met in a sculpture, you are sharing the space and the time with this object, and it's real. And this object is compitiendo, is fighting with you for the space and is sharing the time with you. So what I'm looking when I'm making a sculpture is just that is put a presence on you, face to you. It can be a very impressive presence or sweet presence. It can be something more mysterious if you want, but it's not a story. It's a presence. And
Hmm.
sometimes there are very simple ideas. I remember one of the sculptures I made. The only idea I was to share with the people who was going to see it is just this
Mm.
impression. That's all, and that was the only idea. Was it was guiding me during the process. And of
Interesting.
course, I
That's
love when a writer can see a story in this piece, and
mm,
they tell me I enjoy it a lot. But I'm not thinking in a story. I'm thinking this a presence is in front of you.
interesting. That's actually a really common feeling and sensation that a lot of artists have towards their works. Not just in the sculpting, even in sometimes art, abstract painters. Yeah, I mean, what you said is exactly like a really common thing among people who are like really dedicated to their work, especially when it comes to art and like, wanting that expression. Just at the moment connecting, even for a split second with the work. Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
And and also happen one thing with a sculpture that it's not happening with drawing and painting, because a
Hmm.
drawing or painting, it's a window when you can see other world, and
Hmm.
you can make that this other world is not seeing you, but that's not happening with sculpture. If you have a sculpture in a room, you are seeing the sculpture, but the sculpture can see you too. And it's a
Hmm.
very magic moment when you can feel this, and it's something I like to play with.
Interesting. And well, next question is, what materials and tools do you mostly use for your works?
I love trying everything I can,
Hmm.
and I get bored very easily. So I love to change and try new things. Even I try new things in every piece if I can. But
Hmm.
the main material, the main process I make is as I told you before, is sculpted in clay and plaster, maybe assembly something, and cast it in resin and paint it. And now I'm playing with fabrics and other materials that they are not very usual on a sculpture. But
Hmm.
I'm trying and I'm changing.
Interesting. And when it comes to like someone who's an up and coming artist and especially sculptor, an aspiring sculptor, what advice and tips would you get for someone like, I'm not really sure about sculpting, but like actually you're the first sculptor I have on the show. And how do sculptors make resume and portfolios for themselves? I mean, of course it's an artwork, like it's a kind of art for me, so you can't really measure it like design or graphic design like stuff like that, but still, how do you make a portfolio and resume and a name for yourself to get noticed, to get commissions, all that?
I have no idea. Something I can't tell because I feel I have no control about it.
Hmm.
In for 20 years, nobody was interested in my sculptures. Nobody
Mm.
at all. I was working on other things. And I make exhibitions and I was publishing my artwork, but nobody was interested. I don't know why this changed. Really, I don't know. Um, what I tried 6 years ago, it was when nobody wants what you make. It's very difficult to keep making things because I was making things and keeping them in a room. They are dusty now and they are there. It's not. It's very hard, especially for a sculpture that is very difficult. All the material process with the molds and it's expensive and it's very difficult. So I had to decide if I stop making sculptures and just making other things with my life, or try it once more very
Hmm.
strongly. And that's what I tried. And I left my work. I was teacher. I left the school and I tried to live of my talent with the work of my hands. And I started to make everything I could. even things I didn't like at all. And so I start, and the only thing I changed it was okay. Nobody is interested in my sculptures. I'm going to try to make sculptures that interest someone. So I was not expecting the people to came to my work. I was decided to bring something interesting to the people, but I don't know how to make it, and I don't know why it worked.
Well, I
Sorry.
mean, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. The journey you had is like a really common theme for a lot of people. What I'm basically seeing is that you just stayed consistent with your work, with what you love, and eventually it got attention. And some people don't get recognition for like 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, doesn't matter, for a long time. But then suddenly something goes viral and they get a lot of attention, they get works, they get commissions. Like it's all of a sudden, and it's sometimes overwhelming for the artist. And so yeah, in a sense we could say that just be consistent with your work, do what you love, you know and I mean
I think to
eventually
be
it will catch on.
yes, I think it's being honest. Even now, I have a lot of pressure now to change things or make things differently to make
Hmm.
more pieces or pieces in a different way. But I try to keep being honest with my work, and I'll just make things. Maybe I don't like everything when I make commissions, but I try to make them the best I can all the time, and
Hmm.
always respecting the language of a sculpture. I think for me the main thing is the language. So even if it's something very silly, and I have made very silly things, but always I try to make the silly things in an Egyptian way, in this not perfection, but these round shapes and very powerful shapes. That's what I tried.
Hmm. Interesting. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project is it? Of course, I mean, if it's something that there's a contract involved that you can't talk about, we can skip the question. But if that wasn't the case, what are you working on right now?
Now, well, for the pandemic and all these things, there were a few projects that didn't ended well. They are just cancelled. So I'm in my workshop, enjoying and making my own things without pressure. And it's very funny and it's amazing to do it for a while. So I'm happy. I'm making these robot portraits, and I'm starting a new series of more relief and yes, a little bit of storytelling of characters and compositions, and that's what I'm going to try.
Hmm.
And a
Interesting.
few of secret things, of course. But I would love to make a movie again. And
Hmm.
I'm
Awesome.
very happy. I'm very happy because I made costumes for a musical on theaters in my island. It's very small production, but I enjoyed a lot working with the designer Barbara Bibiloni, who is my partner, and I think she's amazing. And we made the Jungle Book characters, and it was very, very amazing, very, very funny to do. I enjoyed it a lot. How how are,
Mhm.
how are we going to make a Shere Khan and all these animals?
Yeah, I saw a lot of actually when I was going through your stuff on Instagram, I saw a lot of like animal heads, like which detailed animal heads, which was kind of interesting to me.
So
And
this is
what
no, no.
materials did you use for those?
It's resin. They are sculpted in clay and casted in resin, very light resin, and mixed with fabric because it was a thing I wanted to try long time ago, but I never find the moment or the subject to do it. So I said, well, let's try to doing this because it was for costume too. So all
Mhm.
the costume was in fabrics, obviously, and the mask had these fabric elements to make them match with the costume because it's not an animal costume; it's a character.
Mhm.
So I was trying all this. I'm very happy with the tiger with Shere Khan. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's an amazing character.
Mhm. And the next question is a bit hypothetical, which is I like this question a lot because I always get different answers. imagine if you had a lot of extra free time, right? Like right now, you something happened that made you, have a lot of free time. What area, skill, or craft would you focus on learning in that time, in that free time? It could even be not art related, you know?
I think it would be puppetry and mechanics to make moving sculptures, because the
Mm,
sculpture, as it's sharing time with you, space and time with you, it's impossible to express movement with a sculpture. The only way to make movement is to make them move.
mm-hmm.
So I think puppetry it will be one of them.
I think the thing you're talking about is kinetic art, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
I have a good news for you. Actually, the last three episodes on the podcast, I had Casey Curran, who is like an expert kinetic artist who always gets commissions from like the either Sue Hepburn, like yeah, she's a famous fashion designer. He talked about how to get into kinetic art, how to start. Like I think one of the things he mentioned to everyone is to read the book 501 Contraptions, like kinetic contraptions. It was something like that. I wrote the name of the book in like my Instagram of this episode. Uh, so I'm saying to anyone who's watching and also interested in sculpting, of course, you're obviously listening right now to this episode. But if you're like interested in kinetic art, I have an episode ready. In episode 30, you
Okay.
can check it
Great.
out. And all right, with everything been said and done, to conclude basically everything we discussed in this episode, could you please give us a roadmap for someone who's zero in visual arts and design and wants to get to the place you are in terms of skill sets, like basically wants to get into sculpting and become a sculptor? What roadmap, what steps should they take to get there?
Um, what happened with sculpture sometimes is the sculpture. I think is one of the arts that it's very difficult in the technical way, because when you are drawing, you don't have the problem that the paper is broken while you are drawing. That's not happening, but it's happening with the sculpture. You are working with clay. The clay is going to dry and it's going to melt. It's going to make strange things. So sometimes the teaching of a sculpture is very focused on the technique, and in some parts that are important, like anatomy and all these kind of extra things. And we forget sometimes that the most important for a sculpture is to understand what's the sculpture language, and what is the main thing of a sculpture, and this to understand how volumes work. If you are working in painting, you are going to understand the colors. But if
Mm-hmm.
you want to make a sculpture, you have to understand volume and how volume express something. And sometimes we forget that, and I think it would be the main thing. And of course, ancient sculpture is the best way to do it.
Because they got the fundamentals really well done, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and of course, make a sculpture from life, from
Mm.
copying reality.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so in a nutshell, studied fundamentals, practice, 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 and the best, some of the good references are ancient um, references, like from sculptors of ancient artworks, and also as usual, copy real life. For example, you can just make a sculpture out of this water bottle, or I don't know anything, like birds, animals, fruits, anything. Yeah, it's pretty
Yes,
straightforward actually.
and always looking for the language. In music, the language is the harmony and the time. In painting is the
Hmm.
color, and in sculpture is the volume. And
Mm,
sometimes we forget that. A lot of
interesting.
sculptures talks about anatomy and other things, but no, it's the volume. It's how the volume is expressing and is relating to each other and what's happened with it.
Interesting. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming by. Where can people contact you if they had a question or just wanted to contact you in general?
I think the best way is Instagram. I have a Facebook
Mm-hmm.
too, and I have
Mm-hmm.
a small YouTube channel. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm lazy with it. I'm sorry, but I have
Mm-hmm.
a few videos showing my process. But I think
Mm-hmm.
the best way is Instagram. and of course my
Instagram.
Etsy shop.
Oh yeah, I was
Looking
gonna
Tomàs
actually mention
Barceló.
that. All right. There actually the Etsy shop is in his bio. So if anyone, actually, I checked. I'm in Turkey right now, and there's shipping to Turkey as well. So if anyone's interested and want to support the artist guests we have on, the best ways, and actually prices were pretty good, like pretty cheap. And I'm not just saying, by the way, I'm not just saying it because he's the guest right now. Like there were like 30 liras, 42 liras stuff, sculptures and prints, which is not that high. It's pretty. It could be your next gift idea, for anyone who wants to get a gift for their friends or something. So yeah, there's
Well, thank
that,
you.
and yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for coming by, and hope everyone have a good day. Bye. See you next episode.
Thank you.